Hi, my name is Michael Inserra. I'm also known as Mike the Juggler. What you're going to be seeing in this DVD is some examples of how to learn how to juggle if you've never juggled before. If you already know how to juggle, you're going to be seeing some things that might help you progress. I found juggling to be very enjoyable as a form of exercise and as a form of entertainment. And here we go. Okay, what I do is to try to get the ball to the same height each and every time. And I'm not throwing the ball very hard. I'm letting it roll over and over and over so that the ball is actually constantly moving and it goes the same height. That gets you used to throwing the ball to the other hand. Many times I've seen people throw very well with one hand or the other, and then they want to throw it back to this hand because that's the strong hand. If you find yourself doing that, it's okay. Just reverse it and then balance your hands out. But what we want to do is we want to get it to be even. And you don't have to worry about doing it very fast. You want it up here so you have a lot of time and it gives you room for the second ball. Now, I am crisscrossing these in a juggling pattern. The third one would fit in very nicely, but to get to that point, I want to show you the balls going up and down in a column. If you throw them at the same time, there's really no room to have the third one go in. So what you do is up, 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 and then crisscross it. That's the timing. Up, 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 and then crisscross again. Start with one hand, start with the other hand. And again, look at my hands for a little while and see what my hands are doing. Not much. They're very loose, they're very fluid, and I'm more like rolling them. I'm not catching and throwing, catching and throwing, catching. Okay, it's a fluid motion. And the third one, which is a very large step, but take the hand with two balls in it, throw that one first. Don't do more than 3 at a time. That gives you confidence. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then your confidence will build until you are able to get to this point. If you juggle a little bit longer, if you have this skill down already, you see what I'm doing here is I'm lowering them. The tempo is faster, but I'm really not doing any more work. If you're first starting out to get this pattern, give yourself a little time. That's why they're up there like that. But you notice they're going the same height. And lower it. And then bring it back up. And then lower it again. This gives you control. I recommend about 20 minutes every single day. If you are learning how to juggle, if you want to learn a new trick, 20 minutes every single day. This is an exercise to control the ball. You notice my hand letting go, but I'm not slapping it so that it's going to fall down on the ground. Do every exercise with both hands. When you're in a juggling pattern, you catch it, and the juggling pattern stays the same. The tempo is the same. And it adds a little bit more excitement to the people watching, okay? And then you can practice that. Put the pattern back in. The other hand. Put the pattern back in. Go back here. This gives you something more interesting to look at, as well as the people watching you. It gives them an interesting thing to look at. Again, if you know how to juggle, there's always things that you can practice. Same pattern that I'm doing, but I just vary the one ball a little higher, and it's going back and forth. Again, always return to your pattern, but then can surprise people a little bit. And one of the things that I've learned, especially from doing this, is sometimes just stopping is more interesting than any juggling trick because it's a surprise. That's about a year's worth of practice, but it is something that's interesting to see. Again, you snap at it and you give people a little bit more. You see what I'm doing there? I wasn't even juggling, but I'm holding it out here. This is still moving. This one is what everybody looks at because, again, that's the surprise. Let me just show you a little bit of a routine that I do in my show. You have a DVD player, slow it down if you want. And there you go. If somebody's first starting out juggling and they don't have any juggling equipment, I recommend a simple tennis ball. The tennis ball that's modified, and again I'm going to stress safety because you really ought to be careful. Have an adult help you with this. I have sliced into the tennis ball, but I don't slice into it while I'm holding it. There's something called a vise that carpenters use in a workshop. Have an adult help you, cut it open, and you'll see that it's got a big enough opening where you can fill it with something inexpensive. I use rice because it fills it almost completely, and I don't have any space in the ball. If I had space, the ball would do this in midair, and I wouldn't want that for somebody who's beginning to juggle. If it's filled with rice, it lands in your hand, and let me just go sideways. It'll land in your hand, and it'll actually make your hand want to hold on to the ball. That's what you want to do. You don't want it to, well, as you can see, I dropped it. You don't want it to be hitting your hand and then bouncing out. An empty tennis ball would do that. You want it to come down and be solid in your hand. When you want to let it go, you let it go. I keep going back to the one ball when I demonstrate a trick because I'm wanting you to see all the elements of the trick. If I were doing a performance, I wouldn't want to be so introductory to the trick. I would want to surprise you. But what I'm going to do, instead of catching it, I'm going to let it bounce first, and then it just pops in my hand. Throw, it bounces, throw, it bounces. And again, any trick that you feel you want to do, break it down to its simplest elements. Do the trick over and over again so that you can do the trick anytime you want. Okay? The way that I recommend is to make it complex gradually so that I throw the ball. I don't know if you remember when I said that the juggling pattern with two, I'm crisscrossing them down here as well. Throw, 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 throw. Okay? And if you notice, I'm not really throwing them very high up here. If I did that, it would bounce very high. These are extremely bouncy. In fact, I've got these in a dog supply store. These are the kinds of balls that a German Shepherd would have a lot of fun with, and it's very hard, and it bounces almost halfway up on this surface, and that gives me a sure place where I know that's going to be. If it's not bouncing high enough, you can always crouch down a little bit, and it makes it easier for you. Again, the trick itself looks like this. Okay? But if you surprise people when you do it, it looks much more interesting. already there. You notice I really wasn't doing anything at all, but it looks like a surprise. And have fun working on that. Okay, I'm going to show you how to manipulate the traditional juggling club. This shape, when I introduced this in my show, I let people know that this shape actually is the same shape as the old Indian clubs that were made out of solid wood and filled with metal inside, heavier and heavier and heavier. The heaviest ones I've seen were about 25 pounds each, and there was contests, and people would spin these actually, and they would work out with them too. So the shape is derived from that. The handle is what is important here. I stress when you're first learning clubs to work with one at a time. There is a danger of hitting yourself. I encourage people to hold the club in the middle here. It's much more easily manipulated. If you hold the club here, your hand is doing a lot of work and it's very difficult to control. A tendency would be to throw it too far back. What I'm doing, I'm holding it in the middle, and I'm going to pretend I am scooping ice cream. I'm not going to throw it over my head like that. I want to scoop ice cream and get that almost over to where my hand is. If I do that, the club is already here, and the flipping motion is going to land the handle right where I want it, right here, because that's basically where you start. You start with the flip, you catch it, but you keep it going. Just like juggling with balls, you want to keep it flowing as if you are almost guiding the water. That's one of the things that I try to give people an image. You use whatever image you want, but I like the idea of water flowing back and forth, because that's what it would do. It would continually move. And you notice I'm spinning it once. One spin is what a beginner should look at first. Don't try to spin it twice or 3 times right away, because the control is not going to be there immediately. It does give you a little bit more freedom when you have this. Now, when I introduce somebody to juggling, I would encourage you to already know how to juggle 3 balls, and the pattern is exactly the same. The timing of this is the same as when I'm working with a club. So I take 1 club and 2, so that I'm confident with these. I'm introducing something new, and I don't want to make myself completely confused right away. If you want to confuse yourself, that'll come later. And if you see what I'm doing here, I'm going to turn so that you can see what my hands are doing. With the club and the tempo, it's exactly the same as juggling with the 3 balls. The tempo's there. The club is doing something a little bit more interesting than the balls are, but you see how it fits in. Again, if you have trouble with anything, just go back to the basics. Go back to the basic form of what you're attempting. This is a skill that gets much better over time, and again, over practice is just as bad as not enough practice. I recommend 20 minutes a day, but every day, give yourself a little bit of time to do that. And if you notice, I hardly have to look at the club. If you're concentrating and looking at the club, you see what that does to my body. It's also distracting as well. So if somebody's watching you juggle, it's much more interesting if the person's looking at the audience or the few people that are watching, and you do your work with the club almost as a second thought. Now, you get to the point where you are thinking that you want to progress, it's a good sign to want to progress. I just would recommend don't rush yourself. Okay, the clubs are very similar to the pattern with the 3 balls. You have to give yourself room. And again, this is where that ice cream scooping action comes in, because I want to have time to throw the second one without hitting the first one. Okay? I would also say, look at my hands only. Don't look at the clubs all the time. Look at what my hands are doing. Okay? And again, it's flowing. And the steps of adding the third object require that you now have 2 clubs in one hand to start. You have to start with 2 clubs in either hand, because eventually you're going to have 3, and you have the third one here. You position 1 club